What did you say? Jeez. How about you? Exactly. Nice going.
All right.
I see. Hey.
Hello and welcome back to my Let's Play of Persona 5 New Game Plus. It is Monday, the 25th of April, and it being Monday means that we can now stock up a little bit on some of the items that we stocked up for previously, including going to all of the same vending machines that we've been to before, but also collecting a few of the other items like the Earth Burger and things like that are pretty good value for money in terms of the healing that they give us. And we're going to do a bit of that, looking around, because today, as you could probably guess from the incredible length of the video once more, we are heading into the palace for the second and not quite final time, but the second time in order to reach the treasure, to have our infiltration path to the treasure complete, such that when we next come back in, we can then deal with Kamoshida and take his heart and finish off this this initial part of the game, which has been this first palace. So that's what we're going to get up to, and there's not a huge amount for me to really say in a lot of ways as we continue to make our way forth through the palace. A lot of what we've said sort of before is still applying, but there are a few battles here and there which I will definitely mention as either particularly difficult or things that we're going to need to be just aware of with regards to how difficult they may be and particular strategies that may well be useful. We will also get 2 new Persona today, which is always a good thing to talk about. So we'll talk about those, what sort of routes, what paths they make up, and that sort of thing. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this first little bit. So as I continue to shop around, I will see you when we enter the palace. So here we are, back at the entrance to Kamoshida's palace, and the first thing that we have to do is to pick up some treasure that we didn't collect last time because it was in a locked chest and we only had a measly 1 lockpick. Now obviously now we've done some crafting, we have loads of lockpicks in storage, which means that we can definitely take advantage of this, take advantage of the time that we have here. We're going to pretty much avoid most of the enemies because there is, we've already fought most of these battles, so I'm not too worried about doing them again. But also, this is really the splitting point in this particular palace where we start seeing different types of enemies start to show up and things really change. So a lot of palaces you'll find have quite distinctive paths, and they're largely made clear by the persona, or the enemies at least, that you find within them. So at the start of Kamoshida's Palace we see a lot of like the Incubus, we see Agathion like we have here, we see Kelpies and other enemies like that, and then when we get to the second half we're going to start seeing Beriths, a lot more Beriths, which form pretty tough battles, and then right at the end we even see even tougher enemies, so we see a few other persona that we'll definitely discuss because one of them is particularly of interest to us. So there's a natural progression, which obviously makes sense because each persona has its own fixed starting level, so every, in order for you to add them to your compendium, you need to be within their level, and so that limits the persona themselves in terms of their abilities, their power, because they can only be so strong as of a certain level, with specific abilities as well. So it is continuing to be a case of finding a persona's weakness. A lot of the time we already know, most of the time we will already know that, but then upon knowing that weakness, then abusing it to the highest degree to get some all-out attacks and other things like that in order to deal as much damage as possible, and in order to finish off these battles in as swift a time as possible, because the quicker you finish the battles, the easier your time will be. So with that in mind, I think I am going to leave it for now, and I will come back at a later point when the battles start getting really tough, and we'll have a chat about that and about sort of ways that we can sort of mitigate the difficulty, as it were, going forwards. So I will see you later.
Okay. Show me your true form. Persona! It's time.
It's so scary how good I am. Can you finish it?
Persona!
Let's go!
Persona! Let's go, Captain!
Let's go! Don't move!
Alright, hey!
Okay, guys. Two enemies. They're pretty strong. This is our chance. You can have a weakness.
Let's go. Okay. Go now!
Looking cool, Joker!
Persona!
Cool! Looking cool, Joker!
I'll play it. How's that? Hey, besides that, give me a break. Besides that, I'll play it. Hey! How's that? Later.
Now's the time to retreat!
Okay.
We got ourselves.
Show me your true form.
Now's our chance to strike! Go! It's almost scary how good I am. It's almost scary how good I am. Girl, you're right! Let it go already!
Out of the way! Persona!
Who's your weakness?
Succubus!
Joker took one out! Alright!
Do it!
Okay, guys.
Alright.
They were too weak to bother with.
Show me your true form.
Alright, the first move is ours.
Give me a break.
Go, get it going! Okay, dude, watch them carefully! Lose. Panda's over me! Are you alright? Sleepy.
Persona!
Let's go!
Let's
Let's go! Okay, guys. Panda's falling asleep!
Persona!
Shine!
Fixing! Grab it, who's next?
Yeah! Victory!
Okay. Okay, we're done. Let's go. I can feel it.
Treasure chest spotted. Must be something good inside. Hey, wait! Sugar, a treasure chest!
I'll reveal your true form.
Alright, the first move is ours! Let's turn it!
What was Persona?
Get it, Skull!
Persona! Captain Kid!
Get it, Skull! Not over yet!
Let's go. Grab it,
Looking cool, Joker!
Do it.
Finish up!
All right.
That enemy was really weak.
Careful. I saw a shadow.
Anytime.
I'll reveal your true form.
Now's our chance to strike! Go! So scary how good I am. So scary how good I am.
Persona! Let's go, Captain!
Go! Not over yet! I'll get him! Come in! You see that again, Panther? Move! Let's get serious! Finish up!
All right. No match for me.
This door won't open. Joker, a treasure chest!
I can feel it. I'll reveal your true form.
Now's our chance to strike! Go!
Out of the way! Give me a break. Let's go. Such us.
Looking cool, Joker! Alright, got past the baton! Keep the charge! That's the weakness, Panther! Let's finish this! Okay, guys. Let's do fast!
Okay.
That was so easy, I'm yawning.
Careful, have something. I saw a shadow. I'll reveal your true form.
Alright, the first move is ours!
Persona! You're mine.
Cool! Looking cool, Joker!
Persona! Go now!
Cool! Looking cool, Joker!
That'll play it. How's that? Very well. Go on. How's that?
Now's the time to retreat!
Okay.
Talk about
Show me your true form.
Alright, the first move is ours! Finish it!
Persona!
Let's go! Not over yet! Persona! Carmen! You see that again, Panther? Persona! There, Carmen! You see that again, Panther? Show the style! This'll end it! How's that?
Okay.
A stylish... Oh!
I can see it.
Pretty shady.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so we are here on the palace roof, and as the glowing red aura around these enemies suggests, these are going to be some tough battles. The battles up here, specifically on this floor, I believe are either 2 Berith and 2 Pixies, or they will be just 2 Berith. So obviously, and these can be pretty difficult. The Beriths do a lot of damage, and indeed, and the enemies are here are packed close together, which means that you can get ambushed, or alternatively, you can win a battle, and then a second set of enemies appear. So something that we haven't really spoken about, but that happens pretty common, is that if you have 2 enemies that are pretty close together and you interact with one of them, there's a chance that the second enemy will then subsequently rejoin the fray straight away after that battle, and you don't get the opportunity, as you might wish, you don't get the chance to ambush them, which means that the order of events is just as it normally is. The problem with that is the order of events is usually the enemies are faster than us and do a lot of damage. So, as Morgana gets wiped out by one of these Berith, and a common feature is Morgana is pretty weak at this stage in terms of low HP, but you see there the Berith got 2 attacks in a row, not because he killed me, not because he, successfully defeated, but just because he's naturally faster than all of my party. And so when the ambush round is over, and the natural order of things resumes, he goes first, and can easily take out our party. So even there, in a battle that went pretty well in comparison, we actually struggled. And mostly at this point, if you get crit by an enemy, you are going to struggle, most certainly.
I can see it.
So there's this little red patch in the ground that will trigger a battle, and I decided to do it because I want to interact with all of these battles. It gives you a good illustration of what happens when you're surrounded by enemies, i.e. when they ambush you. And so we end up in this sort of formation where the 4 enemies will surround you, and you don't get nearly as much, it doesn't change most things in terms of the battle, really, but there are certain abilities that can abuse this state and other things like that so it does come into play slightly, but not massively. Now the easiest way, obviously, to deal with these sort of battles is to make sure that you either have a Pixie or a Berith in your party, or at least have already included a Berith or a Pixie in your compendium, because then you can knock them down. The other thing is you pretty much need a Sulky in your party at this point. You need access to Bufu because these Beriths will just continue to take hits. So you do need, it's really important to pick up Silky early on. So get a Silky, if you have a Berith, excellent. The problem with Berith is that he's level 9, which means you've either probably got to do a little bit of grinding to get up to level 9 and have him in your party, or you're relying on those Pixies, as I mentioned before, which are obviously very low level. And I think they're pretty much included here to give you an idea of the fact that you can interact with the Pixies in order to get these quite difficult battles over and done with quite quickly. By negotiating for items or negotiating for other things like that. And that's the cycle of events. Those are the main things that you should be thinking about at this point in the game, making sure that you have the opportunity to try and deal with this.
Just watch your distance.
Now, if I remember correctly, one of these battles ends up going really, really badly for me, and I end up having to flee.
Show me your true form.
Now, I don't exactly know the fleeing mechanics off by heart, but I usually will try and make sure that if I am fleeing from a battle, I'm going to do it when the enemies are all knocked down, for obvious reasons. If the enemies are knocked down, it would make sense that they're not going to be as able to catch you up. Generally, if you do select to flee from battle,
Cool, Joker.
Morgana will say, oh, we're working on a way out, and you'll take several turns in order to actually, before you actually escape the battle, which can be an absolute pain when you really want to get out of the battle very quickly. What we're finding, at least here, is that we can knock down these enemies to get to a point. As the Berith gets a critical on and therefore gets an extra hit, which is always delightful, always lovely when they get multiple hits and you just what you need. So yeah, that is what we're sort of, as we continue to work through these fights, this is what we're thinking about constantly in terms of dealing with these enemies. As here we go. So here's the second set of enemies appearing because we were too close to those two sets. Between those two the enemies on the map when we interacted with them. And the interesting thing is, obviously, if you run away from a battle, the palace's security level increases. Whereas if you interact with the enemies via chatting or stuff like that, then that doesn't happen. Via the hold-up, it doesn't happen in the same way, and those enemies will disappear permanently, whereas here the enemies will stay on the map for a small period of time. Okay, well, I've ranted and raved about how difficult these battles are, so I'll let you enjoy watching me struggle with this next battle with only one party member. And I will see you later when we access the tower that we're climbing here in Kamoshida's Palace, and talk to you more then.
Alright, Joker! There, smooth! Joker, you okay? Cool, Joker! Looking cool, Joker!
Calm down.
We're getting out of here. You ready?
Power courses through me. I'll reveal your true form. Persona! Ravish them! Persona! You're mine.
Cool, Joker!
Go ahead.
Looking cool, Joker!
Let's go.
This'll let
You can do this. That'll play it. How's that? Farewell. How's that?
Yes! Victory! Yeah! Victory!
All right.
More enemies! I got too reckless. Go back out and focus on Let's go to trouble! Get some up! So, you okay? Watch your health! Disco!
I'm beat. Here we go. Persona!
Looking cool, Joker!
Ravish them!
Cool! Looking cool, Joker! Is this okay? What do you think? Now's the time to retreat.
All right. Somewhere.
Oh, they spotted us. We should be more cautious.
So we are here at the
Wait.
palace, at the tower, I should say, in Kamoshida's palace.
Focus.
And you can see the distortion effects are starting to become a lot more prominent, and that's a feature throughout all of these palaces as we go onwards. Something that I'm noting, or I'm just going to say now, is that we are heading down this elevator and we are going to do a little bit of backtracking to
Focus.
a previous area in order to access a safe room. Something you might have noticed is that we haven't had a safe room since all the way back to the very entrance of the palace, pretty much. And we've had a lot of difficult battles in between there. Now we are very close to a safe room, but there is one more very difficult battle in between us and the safe room.
Yeah.
And at this point, I would much rather find a safe room and be able to save, such that if we do die, we get to restart at the safe room, rather than even worry, rather than try to speed through and hope for the best with regards to the rest of the
This has to be a joke.
the progress here. It is a lot safer for us to head back to a previous safe room than to take on that difficult enemy right now. I'll see you when we take on that enemy.
Huh.
You notice? I can feel it. Not opening. Guess we gotta find another way. I can feel it. I have something.
This door won't budge. Let's find a safe room.
I can see it. Somewhere.
A treasure chest. Let's...
Focus. I can feel it. There's a treasure chest. Somewhere. Whoa. Somewhere. Good. We made.
Well... What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Okay, let's go. Come on.
I have something. Focus.
Wait.
For real?
Okay, so just before facing off against that particular difficult enemy that I mentioned before, we're actually going to have our, interact with the lift here and have our first battle against this pair of succubi. And succubus is interesting as an enemy because it's the first enemy that will use Marin Karen against you, which inflicts brainwash, and brainwash is not a fun ailment to have. This battle is actually quite dangerous, especially if you don't do well in getting an ambush, because these succubi can do a lot of damage with brainwashing your companions such that they're hurting you and pretty much taking the control away from your party, which is exactly what we don't want. We want our party to be doing everything that we suggest, which is why obviously we're also on manual control and all that sort of stuff.
Tough one.
So yeah, and that gives us another chest. Another reason why we want to come back down here, aside from the fact that it links nicely with, in terms of geographically, where the tower is and linking back all the way to the front hall. The other reason that we really want to go down there is obviously because there are chests down there, and it's always worth us picking up as many chests as possible. So you note, I think I used a stealthanol there. Stealthanols are these items, I've mentioned them before, which we can craft. The main purpose of them is to lower the palace's security level. The palace's security level naturally decreases if you continue to ambush and defeat enemies, so they're not the most useful item in the world, but there are certain cases where it's very useful to have this palace security level low. I've mentioned before that when the palace security level is low, what it means, is 0%. It means that the enemies, you can even run up to them to some extent and interact with them, and they will still not be able to clock you, so you will still get the ambush. Whereas as soon as that goes up to 10%, you will have to approach them from behind in order to ambush them. So here is Archangel, or the Heavenly Punisher as is known, before you learn the name of the persona in question. And this is the battle that I was talking about. It is a repeat, somewhat, of the mini boss battle that you have inside the chapel, with some slight differences. The main one here being that there's a degree that he's now a lot more vulnerable to certain statuses, but also he now has a weakness to electric, which he didn't have before, which means that we can do some all-out attacks, which is very, very useful. Now, if I had a pixie with me, I could make the most of this, but thankfully he's also weak to curse, which means I can use the main character, Marku, here. I can use him to get access to the all-out attacks as well. That battle is that battle can be quite difficult if you're not careful. There's a reason I use Dormina in order to sleep him and get a turn back. Because if he attacks, he does a lot of damage very quickly. And it's another case where if you get crit, you're pretty much done for. And if you crit the main character, then you lose the battle. And it's an absolute pain. That battle is the main reason why, I did all of that going backtracking to a safe room, because I was, I'm worried about that sort of battle. There's another battle here which I don't think is too bad, and you can see that our safe room is just in this room, so we've managed to finally get back to a safe room. I say it's not too bad, it's one of these battles, which is one of, the battles I've been not enjoying for the last few bits. But interestingly, because we've been battling higher enemies, high level enemies, we are starting to gain a bit of attack power, starting to become stronger, and we're doing more damage with all our attacks, and these battles are becoming easier and easier as we continue to make good progress. So with that in mind, it's not going to be too long until we chat again, because we are going to head to the Velvet Room in order to fuse another persona very soon, and I will see you then.
Okay. Let's see it. Somewhere.
This feeling. There might be a safe room around here.
Focus. I can feel it. Ah, nice! We can use this as a safe room.
Well, are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Let's go.
Okay, so we are going to head from just back to the start, take a little breather from all of the excitement in order to get access to another one of the persona in the game. And the persona that we're going to access this time is Berith. So we are finally level 9, which allows us to, if we wanted to, we could interact with a Berith and get their mask that way. But I've said before that one of the what we're doing with this playthrough is we're going to be taking the initial persona of each chain and dragging them all the way through the game. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. The initial so Berith is a status ailment elemental persona, and so we needed to find a way to get to Berith from Incubus, which is the first of those types, if you remember me talking. And the easiest way to do that is to take an Incubus and fuse it with a Jack-o'-lantern to generate a Berith. And the good thing about Berith, especially for us at this point, is because the Berith will have pretty high endurance. You'll notice the small set of stats down below. Whenever we fuse personas, whenever we look at the persona information screen, those stats are our stats, the main character stats, whenever we are using that particular persona in battle. So, you know, if I'm using Berith, I am weak to ice. But you can see that my endurance may well be higher, which means I take less damage and all of that sort of stuff. It does become a thing where you're constantly trying to balance which personas you have out in battle, because obviously if I'm fighting against a lot of ice-type persona, I don't want to use Berith, even if he has very useful skills, because if I get hit by that, then I'm going to be giving them one more, so I'm going to be giving them extra attacks and all that sort of stuff. So, Berith is one of the 72 demons of Gosha. I'm going to pretend I know how to pronounce that. Goetia. Gosha. He's known as the Duke of Hell. He rides a gigantic horse and burns those without manners. That's Berith. Now, the second and last persona that we are going to be grabbing in this particular episode is Andras, and I think we come across an Andras very soon. So we can't take them until they're level 10.
Show me your true
Yes, so we have an Andras here. As you can see, we can't take them on as persona until level 10, but we will do this later on in the episode. But because we're talking about persona, I thought I would bring it up now. Andras is the lowest level of the persona which can be considered ice elemental, starting at level 10. Or at least, sorry, he's not the lowest level, but he's the lowest level that is recruitable from a dungeon. There's actually one that's lower level, but we can't get them from a dungeon until a later stage. So this is the earliest stage that we can get an ice persona, and that is Andras. And so Andras, sort of the owl-looking guy there, he is another of the 72 demons of the Gosha. He's the great Marquis of Hell, or Marquis. Never know how to pronounce that word. But anyway, he's the great Marquis of Hell. He appears where there is battle to stoke the hatred within soldiers. He helps defeat the enemies of those who summon him. And he is going to be the start of the next major line of persona that we're sort of going to follow, which is this ice elemental line. And that completes the 6 that we actually have at this time. The 6 that we will have going into Kamoshida's, going into the boss battle with Kamoshida. So we have a curse persona, a fire persona, a healing persona, a status persona, a wind, and an ice persona. And we'll talk about, I think we changed those, just the specific persona, We'll do a little bit of fusion just before the boss battle itself, and we'll talk a bit more about that in that episode. But that is going to be it from me for now. As the game, you know, there's still a fair amount of battling to do, so I will once more hit the fast forward button and zip through some of this stuff. And I think I will come back when we're really looking at the next most difficult battle, which in particular will be the mini-boss battle at the end of this area. It's not actually too bad, but it is one that we do need to worry about. And otherwise, obviously, keep an eye on how I'm approaching these battles. If ever I feel the need to, raise Joker's defense or anything like that, you know that this is an enemy that has the capacity to deal a lot of damage, and so I'm just being extra cautious moving forwards. Yeah, I'll talk to you when we get there.
Let's go, Captain!
Suspicious. Hey, look!
Joker. Hey, think harder about this. I don't think that's it. Indeed.
No way, man!
Yes! That settles it. You gotta
Show me a true form!
Another kick to strike! Cool! Looking cool, Joker! Yeah. What do you think? Now's the time to retreat!
Okay. I can feel it.
You got ourselves a...
Show me your true form! Let's go. All right.
Persona! Not me, you! Persona!
Persona! Let's go!
Nice going, Skull!
Hey!
This'll let you... Slow down! We've gotta help him!
It's time. Screw that up, this one.
Speak to electricity. Let's go for that side!
Persona!
Around! Nice going, Skull! This'll let you...
Don't come back! This power. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, let's go. That was close. Are you okay?
Focus. For real?
Joker.
Somewhere. Somewhere. I'll reveal your true form.
Alright, first move is off! Ooh, looking cool, Joker! Let's pull back for now.
All right. I have something. It's somewhere. I can see it.
Oh, we can finally rest our feet. Okay, let's move on.
I can see it.
Two enemies! Go under our vision. Give it up.
We shall move. Fine.
Now's the time to retreat!
All right. I have something.
Oh, now! We've gotta help him!
What's wrong?
Persona!
Let's get this over.
Ha!
Screw that up.
What's wrong?
Persona!
Let's get this over.
Captain Kidd!
Slow round! Nice going, Skull!
Let's turn the fort!
Okay, guys, let's do it!
This hurts.
Persona!
Persona! Get this
Persona!
guy.
Persona! Take that!
Persona!
Slow round! Nice going, Skull!
All right. Hey!
This'll let you...
Don't come back! Okay. All right. Tough one. Show me your true form.
Looking cool, Joker!
Ravage them!
Cool! Looking cool, Joker!
Persona! At this.
Cool! Looking cool, Joker! Don't move!
Farewell. How's that?
Now's the time to retreat!
Okay. Focus. Focus.
Well then.
All right, let's go.
Let's get it!
I'll reveal your true form.
Alright, the first move is ours! He can't take gunfire! We're on the road! Hear yourself! That's the holdup! Right there! Okay, guys, let's do it!
Curses.
That's it! That's Conan! See that again, Panther! Persona! Conan! See that again, Panther!
Stay there.
Conan style! This'll let you... Let's get fast!
Okay.
They were nothing.
I have something. Focus. It's somewhere. Focus. It's somewhere. Focus. It's somewhere.
So here we have the Torn King of Desire mini-boss battle. At the end of Kamoshida's Palace, this is the last major battle that we'll do here. And he's not too bad, aside from his incredibly creepy look as an opponent. So our main strategy, or at least the strategy that I decided to use here that worked out really nicely, is to boost Joker's attack using Ryuji, and then to put the mini-boss to sleep using Dormina from Arn, because as we should know from reading the information on status ailments and stuff like that, we should know that enemies who are asleep will take critical damage, or at least, sorry, will take additional technical damage from any physical attack. And then I can use a persona like Berith to deal pretty decent technical damage to this particular enemy. Now, the biggest threat, obviously, with an enemy like this, as you just saw there, is they're still incredibly strong at this point in the game. His assault dive, you know, well over 300 damage to Arn, so I doubt Joker would survive that. And if you get killed by this guy, well, you have to go all the way back to when you last saved at a safe room. So it can be an absolute pain to deal with these sort of things.
All right.
But there we go. The battle that ended up going pretty well for me, just because he didn't hit Joker, which is always great. And you can occasionally just gain a step, because occasionally he will just stare at Arn. Which is something that, you know, is a script, not quite a scripted event, but whenever he does that, he's not going to, you know, he doesn't attack that turn, which means you get an extra turn out of it, which is always great.
Focus. There's a treasure chest.
So here we're going to reach the top. There's actually an enemy just a little later on in this section up on the balcony that I tried to find a way to access and I can't. I'm just assuming that he's there for the background and isn't actually an enemy that we can fight. So with that in, I just thought I'd mention why I end up running around for like 40 seconds, just sort of just backtracking for absolutely no reason. So I just thought I'd clear that up. But other than that, I think that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of what's going to happen here as we finally make our way to the treasure and find out a bit more about that sort of stuff. And I will see you on the next episode, where I can't remember exactly what we do. I don't think we do the boss battle immediately, or at least we definitely can't do the boss battle, but I don't think we trigger the boss battle immediately. So we might do some more confidant stuff and then eventually hit up the boss battle. So I will see you on the next one.
You're mine.
All right.
Let's go. Okay.
Let's go. It's nice feeling.
Focus.
This is a safe room. Well. What are your thoughts? Hey! What are your thoughts?
Let's go.
Okay, let's move on. Seriously? Hey.
Focus.
No. Okay, let's go.
Whoa! Whoa, what is this place? Holy shit! That treasure thing's gotta be in here.
Hey, what is this? It's floating in the air.
That's the treasure. We finally found it! Just hold on a second. I was planning on telling you more once we made it this far. Simply finding the treasure isn't enough. We'll need to make it materialize before we can steal it.
What do you mean?
Desires have no physical form by nature. Hence, we'll first need to make the real person aware that their desires are in fact a treasure. Once they're conscious that their desires might be stolen, the treasure will finally show itself.
But how do we do that?
We warn them. Tell them, we're going to steal your heart.
So we're gonna send a calling card? Oh, that's totally what a phantom thief would do!
Once we do that, the treasure will appear for certain. I think.
That again? Either way, sounds like it's worth giving it a shot.
Our infiltration route is secure. All that's left now is to pump out a calling card in reality, then come back to take the treasure.
This is it, huh?
That's the spirit. Once we send out the calling card, there will be no turning back. Just let me know when you're ready. We'll head back to the hideout and send out that calling card. Well then.
Hey!
Yes! Okay. Now then.
Hey.